The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in March, just as I was settling down with a cup of tea after a long day at the law firm. Dad's voice sounded strained, unusually formal. "Listen, kiddo," he began, using the nickname that always made me feel 12 again, despite being 32 and a successful attorney. "I need to talk to you about Sarah's wedding." My sister Sarah had been engaged to Marcus for 8 months. The wedding was set for June, and I'd already bought my bridesmaid dress, a soft lavender number that Sarah had picked out specifically because she said it brought out my eyes. We'd spent countless evenings planning details, from the flower arrangements to the seating chart. "What about it?" I asked, though something in Dad's tone made my stomach clench. "Well, there's been a situation. Marcus's parents, they've expressed some concerns about the guest list." I set my tea down carefully. "Concerns?" Dad cleared his throat. "They don't think you should attend." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me. Now, before you get upset, before I get upset." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Dad, you're telling me I'm not welcome at my own sister's wedding. How exactly should I react?" "It's complicated, Emma. You know how these things are with families." But I didn't know. That was the problem. I'd met Marcus's parents, Richard and Patricia Whitmore, exactly 3 times. The first was at Sarah and Marcus's engagement party, where I'd had perhaps 10 minutes of polite conversation with them about the weather and my work. The second was at a family barbecue last summer, where Patricia had complimented my pasta salad. The third was at Christmas dinner, where we'd barely interacted beyond pleasantries. "What exactly did I do?" I asked. Dad sighed heavily. "It's not what you did, exactly. It's more, well, they have some concerns about your lifestyle." My lifestyle? I lived alone in a modest apartment, worked 60-hour weeks, and my most rebellious activity was the occasional glass of wine with Netflix. "Dad, I need you to be specific. They think you're too independent, too career-focused. They're worried about your influence on Sarah." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My influence?" "Sarah has a master's degree in marketing and runs her own consulting business. What exactly am I influencing her to do, succeed?" "Emma, please. This isn't my decision." "Sarah's torn up about it. But Marcus is their only son, and they're paying for a significant portion of the wedding. They've made it clear that if you attend, they'll withdraw their financial support." The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. "So you're all choosing their money over me?" "It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple." I stood up, pacing my small living room. "Did Sarah agree to this?" The pause told me everything. "She's hoping we can work something out." "Maybe you could." "I don't know. Talk to them. Show them you're not what they think you are." "And what do they think I am, exactly?" Another pause. "They think you're the kind of woman who puts career before family." "Who might encourage Sarah to do the same." I closed my eyes. The irony was staggering. I'd worked my way through law school, clerked for a federal judge, and was now a junior partner at a respected firm, all while maintaining close relationships with my family. I called my parents every Sunday, never missed birthdays or holidays, and had been Sarah's biggest supporter through every relationship, career change, and life decision. "I need to talk to Sarah," I said. "Emma, don't make this harder for her than it already is." "Harder for her?" I was incredulous. "Dad, I'm the one being excluded from my sister's wedding based on complete strangers' opinions about my character. How is this hard for her?" But I called Sarah anyway. She answered on the first ring, and I could hear she'd been crying. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I told Marcus it was ridiculous, but his parents they're very traditional. And they're paying for the venue, the catering, the flowers, so let me pay for it instead," I said immediately. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "What?" "Let me pay for the wedding." "All of it?" "Then his parents can't hold money over your head." "Emma, no. I can't let you do that. It's too much." "Sarah, it's your wedding. You should have the people you want there, not the people your future in-laws approve of." But even as I made the offer, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. The wedding she'd planned was elaborate, easily $60,000 or more. It would wipe out a significant portion of my savings, but Sarah was my only sister. I'd always imagined being there when she got married, standing beside her, celebrating this milestone. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "What's to think about?" "It's complicated. Marcus thinks maybe it's better to just keep the peace. Start the marriage off on the right foot with his family." "And what about starting it off on the right foot with your family?" She was crying again. "I don't know what to do, Em. I love him so much, and I don't want to cause problems." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I'd built my career on analyzing complex situations, finding leverage points, understanding how power dynamics worked. And I was looking at a textbook case of financial manipulation and family pressure. The Whitmores were using their money to control not just the wedding, but the family dynamics. They were establishing from the beginning that their opinions and preferences would take precedence over the bride's family. It was, I realized, a power play that went far beyond just one day. Over the next few days, I did what I always did when facing a complex problem. I researched. I looked into the Whitmores' business, their social connections, their standing in the community. Richard Whitmore owned a mid-sized construction company. Patricia was active in several charity organizations and served on the board of the local country club. They were, by all accounts, pillars of the community. Traditional, conservative, well-respected. The kind of people who believed in clear gender roles and conventional life paths. The kind of people who would see a single, career-focused woman as a threat to their vision of what their son's wife should become. I could have fought it. I had resources they didn't know about. My law firm had connections, influence, ways of applying pressure. I could have made their lives uncomfortable in subtle but effective ways. Business permits that took longer to process, charity events that suddenly had scheduling conflicts, social invitations that mysteriously dried up. I could have played hardball, and part of me wanted to. The part that had fought for every opportunity, every promotion, every ounce of respect in a profession that still too often questioned whether women belonged there. But as I sat in my office that Friday afternoon, looking out at the city's skyline, I realized something that changed everything. This wasn't really about me at all. This was about Sarah's future. If I forced my way into this wedding through manipulation or coercion, what kind of marriage would she be entering? The Whitmores would never forgive the slight, and Sarah would pay the price for years to come. Every family dinner, every holiday, every milestone would be colored by this conflict. More importantly, if Sarah chose their money and their approval over her relationship with me, that told me something about who she was becoming. And maybe that person wasn't someone I needed to fight for. I called her that evening. "I've made a decision," I told her. "I'm not going to pay for your wedding." "Oh!" She sounded surprised, maybe a little relieved. "Okay. And I'm not going to fight the Whitmores' ultimatum either." "What does that mean?" "It means you have to choose, Sarah. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be and what kind of marriage you want to have. Do you want to start your married life by excluding family members because your in-laws don't approve of them? Do you want to establish the precedent that whoever has the most money gets to make the decisions?" She was quiet for a long time. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You're choosing their money over me." "I understand why. It's a lot of money, and you love Marcus, and you want your wedding to be perfect. But you're still choosing." "Emma, please. Can't you just, I don't know, talk to them? Show them you're not what they think." And there it was. The request that I somehow transform myself into someone more palatable to people who had judged me without knowing me. The suggestion that I should apologize for my independence, my career success, my choice to prioritize my professional development over marriage and children. "No," I said quietly. "I won't do that. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not to make strangers comfortable. And I won't set the precedent that your husband's family gets to veto your family members based on their personal prejudices." Sarah started crying again. "So you're just going to abandon me?" "I'm not abandoning you. I'm refusing to enable a pattern that will define your entire marriage. If you choose to exclude me from your wedding, that's your choice. But it's a choice that will have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I took a deep breath. If I'm not good enough to attend your wedding, then I'm not good enough to be part of your life. I won't be the family member you call when you need something but exclude when it's inconvenient. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice small. You're giving me an ultimatum. No, I'm giving you information. I'm telling you how I'll respond to your choice. That's different. We hung up without resolving anything. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work, taking on extra cases, staying late at the office. My parents called several times, trying to broker some kind of compromise, but I was done negotiating. The wedding was scheduled for the second Saturday in June. I spent that day hiking alone in the mountains, my phone turned off, trying not to think about what I was missing. The ceremony, the reception, the speeches, the dancing. The moment when my little sister became someone's wife. When I got home that evening, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My heart stopped, thinking something terrible had happened. But as I scrolled through the messages, a different story emerged. The Whitmores had made good on their threat. When they learned that Sarah had been wavering, considering ways to include me despite their objections, they'd withdrawn their financial support 3 days before the wedding. Sarah and Marcus had been left scrambling to cover costs they couldn't afford, forced to cancel the venue, the catering, most of the services they'd booked. They'd ended up having a simple ceremony in my parents' backyard with immediate family only. No reception, no band, no elaborate dinner. Just a basic ceremony with cake from the grocery store and sandwiches my mother had made. The messages ranged from angry, from Dad, demanding to know why I hadn't answered my phone, to apologetic, from Sarah, begging me to call her back, to informational, from my cousin, filling me in on the drama that had unfolded. But there was one message that stopped me cold. It was from Marcus, sent just 2 hours earlier. Emma, I owe you an apology. Today showed me what my parents are really like, and I'm ashamed I let them treat your family this way. Sarah has been heartbroken about this whole situation, and I should have stood up to them from the beginning. I hope you can forgive us both. I stared at the message for a long time. The wedding Sarah had dreamed of was ruined. The relationship with her new in-laws was probably irreparably damaged, and I had the power to fix it all with a single phone call and a check. But I didn't call. Not that night, and not the next day. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about something more fundamental. If I rescued them now, after they'd chosen the Whitmores' money over my presence, what lesson would they learn? That their choices didn't have real consequences? That family members were interchangeable, disposable when convenient, retrievable when needed. More importantly, what would it teach the Whitmores? That their financial manipulation worked, even if it took a little longer than expected? That they could hold money over people's heads without real repercussions. A week after the wedding, Sarah came to my apartment. She looked exhausted, older somehow. We sat in my living room drinking tea, the silence heavy between us. I made a mistake, she said finally. Which mistake? All of it. Letting them dictate who could come to my wedding. Choosing their money over my family. Not standing up for you when I should have. I nodded but didn't speak. Marcus's parents aren't speaking to us now. They said we embarrassed them in front of their friends by having such a pathetic wedding. They're telling people we're financially irresponsible and that Marcus made a mistake marrying me. The irony was almost too perfect. The Whitmores had gotten exactly what they wanted, me excluded from the wedding, and they were still unhappy because the result didn't meet their standards. I'm sorry that happened, I said, and I meant it. Are you? Sarah's voice was sharp. Because you could have prevented all of this. You could have just paid for the wedding like you offered. You could have answered your phone when everything fell apart. And there it was. Even now, even after seeing the Whitmores' true nature, Sarah still thought the solution was for me to fix things. Still thought I should have compromised myself to make their bad choices work out better. You're right, I said. I could have done those things. But then what would you have learned? What I would have learned? She stood up, pacing to the window. Emma, this is my life we're talking about, not some teaching moment. Your life, your choices, your consequences, I agreed. You chose to exclude me based on the opinions of people who barely knew me. You chose their financial support over your relationship with me. When that choice backfired, you want me to fix it." She whirled around to face me. "I want my sister back. I never went anywhere. You decided I wasn't worth having at your wedding. Now you've discovered that the people whose approval you valued over mine aren't actually on your side. That's not my problem to solve." Sarah sank back into her chair, tears flowing freely. "So that's it? You're just going to cut me off forever?" "I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. You made a choice that told me exactly where I stood in your priorities. I have to decide how to respond to that information." We talked for another hour, but nothing was resolved. Sarah wanted absolution without accountability. She wanted me to understand her impossible position without acknowledging that she'd created that position by agreeing to exclude me in the first place. Over the following months, we maintained a cordial but distant relationship. Family dinners were awkward, holidays strained. My parents kept hoping we'd work things out, but they didn't understand that there was nothing to work out. Sarah had shown me who she was when pressed to choose between her principles and convenience. I had simply adjusted my expectations accordingly. The real lesson came 6 months later when Sarah called me in tears. Marcus's parents had been systematically undermining their marriage, criticizing everything from Sarah's cooking to her career to her family background. They'd made it clear that Sarah would never be good enough for their son, and Marcus was starting to echo their criticisms. "They hate me," Sarah sobbed into the phone. "Nothing I do is right. Marcus won't stand up to them, and I feel like I'm losing myself trying to make them happy." I listened without offering solutions. This was the marriage she'd chosen, the family she'd prioritized. The pattern that had started with excluding me from their wedding was now playing out in their daily lives. "I should have listened to you," she said finally. "About what?" "About the wedding. About not letting them control things from the beginning. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. It would have been easy to say, 'I told you so.' It would have been satisfying to point out that this was exactly what I'd predicted. But Sarah was in pain, and she was finally beginning to understand the lesson I'd tried to teach her." "What are you going to do?" I asked instead. "I don't know. Marcus thinks I should just try harder to get along with them. But I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not just to make them comfortable." The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. She was facing the same choice I'd refused to make: transform herself to please people who would never accept her. "Then don't," I said. It wasn't advice, exactly. It was just a statement of fact. She could choose to keep contorting herself to fit the Whitmores' expectations, or she could choose to be herself and deal with the consequences. Sarah and Marcus are still married, though the relationship is strained. She's learned to set boundaries with his parents, which has created ongoing tension. Marcus has slowly begun to see his parents' behavior more clearly, though he still struggles to confront them directly. Sarah and I have rebuilt our relationship, but it's different now. There's a careful quality to our interactions, a recognition that our bond isn't as unshakable as we once believed. She understands that I won't sacrifice my principles for family harmony, and I understand that she sometimes chooses the path of least resistance even when it compromises her values. The Whitmores still don't like me, though we've never had another direct confrontation. At family gatherings where both families are present, we maintain polite distance. They've never acknowledged their role in the wedding disaster, and I've never demanded an apology, but I've learned something valuable about family dynamics and the power of saying no. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow people to experience the full consequences of their choices. Sometimes teaching a lesson means refusing to provide rescue when the lesson is still being learned. I held all the cards that summer: the financial resources, the connections, the power to fix everything. But the most important card I held was the willingness to walk away. And sometimes, not playing that card is the strongest move of all. The wedding Sarah ended up having wasn't the one she'd dreamed of, but it was honest. It reflected the choices she'd made and the values she'd prioritized. And in the end, maybe that was more important than lavender bridesmaid dresses and elaborate centerpieces. I still have the dress hanging in my closet. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently, if I'd swallowed my pride and found a way to attend despite the Whitmore's objections. But I know the answer. The lesson would have been postponed, not avoided. And the cost of teaching it later would have been much higher. Family politics do come with a hefty price. Sometimes that price is paid by the people who refuse to play the game. But sometimes, if you're patient enough and principled enough, the bill comes due exactly where it belongs.